Good morning, everyone. We're going to look into residual training effects and, put simply, how long can I keep my gains? I'm sure it's a question that everybody wants to find the answer to. Excuse the hair. It seems to have a little bit more volume today after washing it, but enough about my hair. Let's get on to the presentation. So as usual, we're going to go through today's topics pretty simply again: the what, the why, the when and the how, and then hopefully a take-home message. Now, this was a phrase or an effect first touched upon by Vladimir Isherin, and this is from the book, if you do want to purchase and have a look for yourself, Block Periodization, a breakthrough in sports training. Now, in terms of what this means, the actual phrase described is the retention of changes in the body state and motor abilities after the cessation of training beyond a certain time period. Simple terms for all of us, this refers to how long after you stop training a certain quality you can retain the abilities. So prime example, which most people are sort of used to, and we'll use the analogy of a power lifter. I know there's a couple of people on the powerlifting programs, so build them to, say, a competition squat, and that competition max squat may look to be 200 kilos for this individual. Now you build a whole cycle up leading up to that, and when you get to competition, you hit that 200 kilo squat, and it's great. You've hit your goal, hit the squat. But after that, there's going to be some point of maybe a deload after your competition, a little bit of time off. So maybe like 2 weeks after you try to do a 200 kilo squat again, it may be out of the question just because you've built up to that point. But then there's also a bit of a detraining effect because you haven't maintained that sort of maximal force output for that period of time. So there'll only be a certain amount of time you can actually hold on to that strength. All your strength does not disappear. That's not what I'm saying. But a certain element of it, say really specific, like this type of strength, will actually start to deter after a certain point in time. And more or less looking in terms of strength, you can see here, this is the graph taken from obviously that book, which breaks it down nice and simply. With strength and oxidative energy system, it's basically the aerobic system. It's 30 days plus or minus 5 days. So they're the longest sort of qualities you can hold onto. Glycolytic energy system, and obviously 18 plus or minus 4 days. So glycolytic being something around maybe 400 to 800 meter in terms of aerobic work. Repeated power, 15 plus or minus 5 days. So again, repeated sprint abilities. So maybe during, say, rugby or football, your ability to repeat them bouts of efforts, if you're going to be doing them for a consistent amount of time, say in season, out of season, they may have to be retrained as you are going into the season. So, and then the shortest of them all is the ATP CP system and also speed. So these are lasting around 5 plus or minus 3 days. So if you think of really maximal and fast sprints, explosive efforts, maybe within the gym, like your jumps, etc. So just a nice little visual that people may be able to get a little bit more of an insight to training effects and examples. Now we touched on the what, but here's a little bit behind the why. So originally this was based on track and field sports. Now we know that there is some similarities with field sports, such as like your rugby, football, even like lacrosse, hockey, them type of sports with team sort of elements, but there is also not too much similarities in a way that they prepare for a certain point in competition. Let's say it's the Olympics, which comes around every 4 years, so they've got a specific date. Whereas in field sports, the competition is sort of all year round, so it's quite hard to isolate certain qualities and build on them where they may be all needed at once. So in relation to block periodization, what we sort of touched upon then, it's a method that we use to focus on a certain quality during a certain cycle. So let's say we focus a 4-week cycle on maybe strength, then we focus a 4-week cycle on power, and then a 4-week cycle on speed. We isolate that as a priority, and others take sort of second and third priority. Doesn't mean we don't train power when we're training for strength, and we don't train speed when we're training for power, but they just take a little bit more of a back step. So the main priority is the one that we focus on. And the reason behind this is most probably to get the most out of each quality at specific points in the year. But like we said, track and field do have certain dates in the calendar that they can maybe focus on that quality and build on the next. Whereas we look at team sports, it may be a little bit more difficult to do that because we do call upon all of these qualities at basically the same time. Prime example, we use rugby. Strength is needed to create maximal force within tasks such as high effort sprints, but also tackling. On top of that, within the same game, we also need the aerobic or oxidative system that we touched upon before. And this is needed for recovery from maybe a high burst of these short explosive efforts, but also the ability to last the period of the game. Now we dive a little bit more into the what and the why. So it might be creating a little bit more confusion around your training. And you could be wondering now, how the hell am I going to train all these qualities and also keep all of these qualities without losing them? Now, we can actually take some points from this effect. An example we use with obviously field sports or team sports is pre-season. And normally the prime focus is building the aerobic work back up after a point of maybe rest or time off to basically focus on the season ahead and the demand it's going to be placing on this quality. Now, we also need the reintroduction to qualities such as strength, with heavy loads being implemented, power and speed with light to moderate plyometrics and ballistics after a long, potentially time off our feet and producing these high amounts of forces. It also might be a good time to highlight certain qualities that actually need to be brought up to standard. Strength might be really, really high, producing really high amounts of force, but then we look at power or speed and it's quite low compared to the strength. We can't produce them high amounts of force really quickly. So that could be a focus we switch based on residual training effects and just highlight a little bit more for the coach or the athlete to focus on them points. And then you might be wondering, like, well, how can I actually do this without maybe affecting certain qualities? Now, concurrent training is a method, and it's probably used often without people actually realizing. And it might be in some of the Build Strong programs you see, such as Strong and Fast, Fight Strong, where we're training multiple qualities across the week or certain days, with maybe a little bit more emphasis on one, where the other one takes a bit of a back step. And it's a combination, like we mentioned, of resistance and endurance training, and it's programmed in an environment in a manner that allows us to maximize all of the qualities at once rather than just focusing primarily on one and maybe losing a little bit more of another. This does delve into a couple of more solutions in terms of the how, such as exercise order. This is a big thing that we touch upon, such as maybe placing power exercise at the start of your session to really get the most out of them, because we know that performed under fatigue, we might not get the most out of them. But also combination of compatible modalities. It's something that we may do another lecture on, but we'll briefly touch upon, where if we look at the bottom of that previous graph, you've got speed and ATP CP. Now, ATP CP may be things such as explosive sprints over a short distance with maximal recovery. But we know that can be done also inside the gym, with things like really high focus jumps or loaded jumps, where we do 1 to 3 reps at best, focus on really high level output, but then we take maximal rest. Now, this is what's seen as compatible modalities, because you've got one is seen as a conditioning tool or a cardio element, and the other one is a strength. But in terms of how compatible they are, they use very similar or not the same energy systems and a lot more deeper physiology, so they can be sort of trained together. Whereas if you trained speed within the gym, and then potentially done a long aerobic oxidative energy system workout that is up to 30 minutes, you may affect sort of the cross signaling that the body is like, okay, well, what am I doing here, speed, or what am I doing here, aerobic? And you don't really get 100% out of each, you maybe get a little bit out of each. So that's what we are discussing there, but we might save that a little bit more for a future presentation. Now, some take-home messages. Note that the maybe different focuses at different stages of training, and it is actually okay to lose a little bit of one quality, but still maintain a quality to prioritize another. So there may be a point where you focus on developing speed, but endurance takes a little bit of a back step. It only takes a back step, it's maintained. You don't completely neglect it and shut it out. It just doesn't become priority. Now speed is the focus. So this is where people, I think, get a little bit confused. You don't completely stop the aerobic work or conditioning, but just take a bit of a back step. So it's still sort of being developed and maintained. Concurrent training, like we touched upon in the previous slide, can allow all qualities to be a constant uphill progression. So keep developing different qualities and sending them sort of up and up rather than taking one really high and leaving the other one down below. Again, use this as a tool rather than actual facts, and shape your own context with it. Don't take this as sort of the be all end all message. Now we tend to look at sort of S&C around the athletic population or field sport, and the focus often seems to be around the longest lasting qualities. So strength, aerobic, which we touched upon, 30 plus or minus 5 days, but often overlooked is the ones that last the shortest, such as speed and ATP, CP qualities. There may be an argument there to focus a lot more on this, such as the speed and ATP, where the aerobic and strength can actually just be maintained. And there's definitely a point of diminishing returns with these, that you start to develop aerobic work to a point where it down-regulates your speed work, and then same with strength. You take it to a point when you're producing loads and loads and loads of maximal force, but it hinders your ability to produce that force quickly. So definitely some food for thought. And then probably the biggest take home is a short time off, such as a week, potentially 2 weeks when we go on holiday, etc., doesn't lead to loss in gains. So all of that work that you've been doing in your program, after you take a couple of days off, we know that it doesn't lead to a complete write-off of all your strength, power, speed that you've worked to build on. It may take a little bit of a drop, but not too much. So hopefully you learned a little bit from this presentation. Any questions moving forwards, don't hesitate to give us a message, and we'll catch you in the next one.